Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Midnight Mirage Classic. So, in this evening's tape, I want to examine and analyze some more keys to power. In the last tape, we talked about the psychology of the gator or the alligator. We talked about the preparation, the planning, the perfect timing, and the patience of the alligator, and how this is very, very important for a man to reach his highest apex of success and to meet his life purpose. So the goal and the objective of this evening's tape is for us to analyze and critique some of the attributes of the coyote or the fox, and how we want to incorporate this into our own psychology, our behavior, and our emotional state of being. All right. So that is the goal and the purpose of this tape, to provide you some keys to power, and so you will understand some of the necessary ingredients that must be present for you to be successful for whatever it is you are here to do in your life. All right. So the introduction to this tape will be a couple of experiences that I've had. And when they happened, they were very, very symbolic, and they actually inspired me to want to make this tape and to distribute this information to you all as well. So, just a background. A lot of times when it gets, pitch black at nighttime, one of the things I like to do to relax myself and, go into a state of contemplation is that I'll go deep into the woods or deep into any kind of forest area that is in my, immediate environment. Okay. And this is something I've always done. It's just peaceful to me, whether it's the winter time, whether it's the spring, the fall, or the summer. I like to be into the forest or the woods late at night. And one of the things that will happen is when you're out in the woods or the forest late at night, you will come across the different nocturnal creatures and beasts of the night. You will see them and they will see you. And I was saying, like, this really started with myself personally a couple of years ago. But it seemed like it kind of increased in like the last couple of months. But what would happen is that, it would get late at night, sometimes around maybe 11, 12, 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. And I would go deep into the woods and do my meditation, and several times I came across a coyote or a fox deep in the woods. Okay. I can remember one time, I was sitting there, relaxing with my marijuana, just contemplating, meditating, thinking on my, my life, doing a lot of introspection, because the woods and nature is very, very quiet. You hear the crickets around you. You hear the rustle of the leaves. So it's a very good, natural background of white noise, basically, to help you get deep into your own thoughts and help you analyze yourself. So that's what I'll use those times to do, to go deep into my own subconscious, which represents a form of the dark night. So while being in the woods, I can remember one time I was standing there looking at the moon, and literally a couple of feet away from me to my right hand side, I saw a long bushy tail move. And as I looked a little bit closer, as it continued to move on, I saw it was actually a coyote. And he probably was no more than maybe about 5 to 8 feet away from me. Okay. And when I saw it, it looked at me. I looked at it. I didn't move. It didn't move. And after a couple of seconds, it just turned and it just walked off, and it kept going on about its business. That was one evening. Another evening, I can remember being outside at night, and, this time it had just got done raining, so how when it's raining all night and then the rain is done, the street and the concrete is still wet. And I can remember seeing the street light reflection on the, shiny concrete from the rain. And to my far left, because I was, sitting kind of behind a corner, but to my far left, I saw a small fox, or like a small coyote. He literally walked right in front of me. He didn't see me this time. He walked right in front of me, and he proceeded to walk his route. And when he got up under the street light, that was probably about maybe about 15, 20 feet away from me, I could actually see like, wow, that was a small coyote or a small fox. And then there were a couple of other occasions where I saw, different creatures in the night, coyotes and fox. So one day I started to think to myself, what is the symbolic, message in this? Why am I seeing these creatures in the night as I'm out there meditating? And the esoteric symbol that I came up with myself is ultimately, all of us have that cunning coyote or that beast inside of us. And a lot of the times when you examine your subconscious mind, you will become more familiar with your own animal instincts and your own animal nature. And we all have it. But what I got from it was the coyote or the fox, he was very quiet. He was very cunning. And I actually exhibited those same traits. I was very quiet and I was very cunning. And we so happened to meet each other in that night. It was almost like man versus wild or man versus beast. So it began to make me think. And I thought about the analogy of Machiavelli when he talks about the fox and the lion, and how a young prince or a man that is on his road to become powerful, he must take on the attributes of both the fox and the lion. The lion is a very, very majestic, strong, powerful, ferocious beast. You can see him coming. He's very loud and he's very dangerous. But sometimes what happens is that the lion can fall into a trap. The lion will not be as enigmatic. He won't be as puzzling. He will try to use his robust, muscular brute force to dominate his prey. And in certain occasions of life, when you're very, very aggressive and direct, that works. But then you have other times in life where you're supposed to be more elusive, a little more deceptive, and a little more enigmatic to reach that same goal. And that's where the fox comes in. So I want you to think about the fox, how he hunts at night, how he snoops with his nose low to the ground, how he's very, very quiet. He doesn't want to be heard, yet he reaches and meets his objective. Okay. So you got to understand in life that there is a time to be the lion and there is a time to be the fox. There is a time to be, bold and courageous and, very straightforward. But you also have the times where you're supposed to be a little bit more puzzling, as I say, enigmatic, and a little more mysterious. All right. Because in life, sometimes when when somebody can see the cards that you got in your hand, they can play against you. All right. So the lion, he could get caught in snares and traps of the hunter, whereas the cunning fox or the coyote, he can escape and elude these snares and these traps. So that is the introduction to this tape that, I want you to think like the cunning coyote or the cunning fox to get some of your objectives met in life. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is, something that when I was very young, I saw this movie and it had a very profound effect on me. But it is called The Odyssey. And it talks about, a man named Odysseus, who was the king of Ithaca. And there was a war called the Trojan War. All right. And Odysseus, being the king of Ithaca, he had to, of course, leave his kingdom behind. He had to leave his wife, his son, and he had to go on this long, arduous journey to go through the war, survive the war, conquer, and then be able to return to his kingdom. So the Odyssean journey or the Odyssey really is showing you the kind of like that process that a man goes through to become his ultimate self. That is one of the small parables that you'll get from the Odyssey and watching it. And one of the attributes that you'll see Odysseus has is he's very cunning and he's very sly, just like the fox or the coyote. There were several examples of this. So, I want you to think, if you've seen it at least, or if you haven't seen it, go check it out. But there's a part where in the beginning, of his journey, when he set out to go, on his journey, he comes across basically a plot of land or a set of land. He comes into this cave with his men. And in this cave, long story short, they come across this giant Cyclops who has one eye. And this Cyclops was known for eating men, eating animals, and he was very, very ferocious, and he was very, very nasty and dangerous. And he was also illogical. So Odysseus and his men, in fear, trapped in the cave, had to come up with a scheme to get out. Now, a lot of the men that were with Odysseus, they were impatient, and not all of them survived the journey. As a matter of fact, because they didn't know how to interact with that Cyclops in the proper way, and they weren't cunning, the Cyclops devoured some of them. So Odysseus, understanding the importance of the sly fox, he takes a different approach. And what he chooses to do is to soothe the ego of the beast, to soothe the mind of the Cyclops, to bring the defenses of the Cyclops down, to get the Cyclops to be very, very comfortable so he's not a threat. And this will make the Cyclops vulnerable. So what Odysseus did was he was a very, very, he courted the Cyclops. You know, he was calm. He was nice to the Cyclops. He fed the Cyclops, and he had wine and very strong beverage to give to the Cyclops, knowing that it would get the Cyclops very drunk. And in his sleep, they would then be able to figure out a way to get out of the cave. And ultimately what ended up happening was that the Cyclops got very drunk, and Odysseus and some of his men, if I can remember correctly, you know, they took a spear and stabbed the Cyclops in his eye. And eventually it was a very large boulder, if I can remember correctly, blocking the door. But, you know, anyway, long story short, they ended up being able to get out of that cave because of the skill sets of Odysseus. You know, him using deception to trick the Cyclops, and that's how they got out. So in other words, he was behaving as the cunning coyote, okay? So, you know, this is something that you see show up with Odysseus. Another thing in the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, you'll see Odysseus in that movie using a lot of cunning psychology against Achilles. And he basically was able to manipulate Achilles into joining the war, so he would fight on their side and they would have a great warrior on their side. And what did he do? He played into the fantasy of Achilles. He made Achilles think that he was going to be seen as this great heroic figure, and he would be known throughout the annals of time and throughout the records of history if he fought in this great war. All right. And this is, of course, what led Achilles to join Odysseus in this journey. And he even refers to Odysseus as being very, very manipulative, but he was a very charming type of man. So that's another thing that you will see, that the human man, when you're cunning and enigmatic, you have to also include charm with it as well. Okay, so being charming is part of it. And this is what led them to, you know, get in the war. And in the minute, I'll read a little bit about the Trojan horse, because all of us know about the Trojan horse. And that was actually a concept thought of Odysseus. So you have the giant in the Cyclops. You have, you know, getting Achilles to fight in the war. And you have also the Trojan horse that they used to get behind the gates of Troy. So these were all military strategies of success used by Odysseus to get him to his objective, which was to win the war and to be able to return home safely. Okay. And just like Odysseus needed these traits, as a man, you will need these traits as well. I don't care if you're on the journey to, you know, become an entrepreneur, or you're building yourself up as a man so one day you can have your own family. You're going to need to include these attributes into your life path, okay, and your arsenal of weaponry to become successful. Another thing too is you'll think that, well, I don't want to be a deceiver. I don't want to be a quote unquote liar. And you will include morality in your objective. Like I said in the previous tape when we talked about the gator psychology, unfortunately, power is nothing but primary influence. And in the game of power, it's almost like the streets. There are no rules. So there are no morals and no ethics in the game of power. You know, it's not like a football game where the only way you can tackle the player is by, you know, pulling the player down the proper way. But if you do a horse collar, they'll call a flagrant foul on you, or they'll give you a penalty. So there are certain ways that you go about it in the sports world, but in the business world, in the money world, the romantic world, the love world, believe it or not, that world is very amoral. There are no ethics and there are no morals to it. So if you are the type of man that thinks, you know, well, I don't want to be that way and I'll still figure out how to be successful in life, I'm not saying that you won't. Maybe you will. But there's a tenth of 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 a chance that you'll be able to become successful. Because the people out here that you are competing against, your rivals, your competition, they won't be using rules. And what you'll also find is when you research into some of the people that are controlling a lot of the economics of the world, controlling a lot of the natural resources of the world, controlling the social engineering and the mindset of the different ethnic groups in all these nations of the world, these people are very, very Machiavellian, and they are very, very cunning, like the sly fox. They are very, very Odyssean. So either you're going to play the role of the cunning fox in life, or somebody's going to be playing that role against you. There are only two positions. You either are going to be the hunter or you're going to be the prey. And that may sound very harsh, but it is the truth. All right. So what I want to do real quick is read in one of my favorite books, 48 Laws of Power. And we're going to read law number 12, which is use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. So selective honesty and generosity was used by Odysseus versus that giant in order to conquer the giant so they could get out of the cave. So, me personally, one of the things that, psychologically I do, because I'm a very, very cunning and deceptive person when I know I need to be. And sometimes you have to prepare your mind and program your mind a certain way so you can reach your objective. So in one reality, a person may call giving false information a lie. Whereas me, in that same reality, I may call it a strategic response. So let me repeat that one more time. In one person's eyes, they may see me giving false information or misleading information as telling a quote unquote lie. But in that same scenario and circumstance, in my own eyes, I may see it as giving a strategic response. Okay. So a strategic response would have been, if the giant would have been asking Odysseus, well, why are you giving me all this drink and being so nice and being so generous? And Odysseus may have said, well, I'm just a kind man and you've been very, very hospitable to us by letting us, relax here in your cave. Was that a lie or was that a strategic response? Because had he told him the truth, the giant would have devoured Odysseus and cut his head off. So using selective honesty is a Machiavellian tactic that a king or a ruler or an emperor, the man of power, the prince, must use if he wants to be a man of influence one day. So let's read and see what we can come up with. Judgment. One sincere and honest move will cover over dozens of dishonest ones. Open-hearted gestures of honesty and generosity bring down the guard of even the most suspicious people. Once your selective honesty opens a hole in their armor, you can deceive and manipulate them at will. A timely gift, a Trojan horse, will serve the same purpose. All right. Let's continue. So now we're going to page 92, law number 12 and 48 Laws of Power. Over 3,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks traveled across the sea to recapture the beautiful Helen, stolen away from them by Paris, and to destroy Paris's city, Troy. The siege lasted 10 years. Many heroes died, yet neither side had come close to victory. One day, the prophet Calchas assembled the Greeks. Quote, "Stop battering away at the walls," end quote, he told them. Quote, "You must find some other way, some ruse. We cannot take Troy by force alone. We must find some cunning stratagem," end quote. The cunning Greek leader Odysseus then came up with the idea of building a giant wooden horse, hiding soldiers inside of it, then offering it to the Trojans as a gift. Neoptolemus, a son of Achilles, was disgusted with this idea. It was unmanly. Better for thousands to die on the battlefield than to gain victory so deceitfully. But the soldiers, faced with a choice between another 10 years of manliness, honor, and death on the one hand, and a quick victory on the other, chose the horse, which was promptly built. The trick was successful, and Troy fell. One gift did more for the Greeks' cause than 10 years of fighting. Selective kindness should also be part of your arsenal of deception. For years, the ancient Romans had besieged the city of the Philicians, always unsuccessfully. One day, however, when the Roman general Camillus was encamped outside the city, he suddenly saw a man leading some children towards him. The man was a Philician teacher, and the children, it turned out, were the sons and daughters of the noblest and wealthiest citizens of the town. On the pretense of taking these children out for a walk, he had led them straight to the Romans, offering them as hostages in hope of ingratiating himself with Camillus, the city's enemy. Camillus did not take the city hostage. He stripped the teacher, tied his hands behind his back, gave each children a rod, and let them whip him all the way back to the city. The gesture had an immediate effect on the Philicians. Had Camillus used the children as hostages, some in the city would have voted to surrender. And even if Philicians had gone on fighting, their resistance would have been half-hearted. Camillus's refusal to take advantage of the situation broke down the Philicians' resistance, and they surrendered. The general had calculated correctly. And in any case, he had nothing to lose. He knew that the hostage ploy would have not ended the war, at least not right away. By turning the situation around, he earned his enemy's trust and respect, disarming them. Selective kindness will often break down even the most stubborn foe. Aiming right for the heart, it corrodes the will to fight back. Remember, by playing on people's emotions, calculated acts of kindness can turn a Capone into a gullible child. As with any emotional approach, the tactic must be practiced with caution. If people see through it, their disappointed feelings of gratitude and warmth will become the most violent hatred and distrust. Unless you can make the gesture seem sincere and heartfelt, do not play with fire. So let's analyze this real briefly. So as we can see, we read about Odysseus and the Trojan War and how after 10 years of fighting, they came, no closer to actually conquering the city. And all the men at that time, they thought like the lion. They were used to being manly, having honor, and having a certain pride in how they fought war. So in other words, they thought that it was these rules to war. They thought that it was certain morals and ethics to war and what quote unquote manhood is. But Odysseus, being the cunning wise one, realized that being selectively honest and being generous would actually weaken the defenses of the enemy. And the lion-like men that were with him had to see his cunning fox consciousness and see him actually decide to make the Trojan horse. And then the men hide inside of it to get into the city. And then they saw that it worked. So once again, we're going back to the Machiavellian principle. There's a time to be the lion and be bold. And there's a time to be the fox and be cunning. And Odysseus understood that in order to reach the objective, they had to be cunning. So understand that being cunning will get you to where you need to go, where being bold won't. Okay. And this is what I want to wrap it up with, because this is also very, very important when a man is on his Odyssean journey. Remember, the Odyssean journey is you going from the lower self to the higher self. You actually reaching your life purpose. You actually meeting the objective and actually accomplishing the reason why you are here on this earth. Every man and woman has a purpose. They are here. You have some kind of skill and talent that you can provide to the earth environment, and it will be favorable for the earth environment. But you have to go through a process to figure out what that is, to be able to cultivate that skill and talent, and then be able to distribute that to the world so the world can get the benefit from that. And that is not an overnight process. That is a lifelong journey. And in the movie The Odyssey, or in the Trojan War, this is the story of Odysseus. Okay. So this is where, we can zoom in and see a microcosmic example of a man's life journey. All right. And as you can see, he was cunning. He knew how to elude certain traps. But I'm going to tell you where most men fail on a life journey, because this is also, something that showed up in the Odyssey with Odysseus. Odysseus ended up becoming distracted when he reached the island of the Sirens. So most of us have heard about the Sirens before, all right? After being, 10 years in the Trojan War, that long, arduous journey, a lot of death, a lot of hunger, lack of resources, being on ships and being in the, traveling for miles and miles and miles for weeks and weeks and months at a time. And what would happen is that you will start to become fatigued on the journey to becoming your highest self. All right. You will get tired from staying down to come up. You all have heard me use that term before, stay down to come up. And any man that's going from the bottom to the top, you got to be very, very patient because it won't happen overnight. So that means that there are going to be a lot of things that you're going to be uncomfortable with, that you're going to have to master learning how to deal with them. So that means that while Odysseus was on that journey, he was away from his family. So that certain isolation and being lonely, that feeling of being lonely sometimes, he had to learn to master that. He had to learn to master his appetite because maybe he didn't have the best type of food around. So when you're on this journey to become an entrepreneur and you're a young man and you're growing into that, there are going to be times where you're going to be alone. There are going to be times where you don't have the resources and the money you need. And you may be able to stay strong a couple of days. You may be able to stay strong a couple of weeks. But what happens when it turns into months? What happens when it turns into years? Let me give you an example right now with myself. It's taken me 8 to 10 years to get to where I am now. And I'm still on my own Odyssean journey. But nevertheless, it took me 8 to 10 years just to get to the point I'm at now. And of course, through that 8 to 10 years, you have times where your endurance gets attacked. It's hard staying down to come up. It's hard staying disciplined every day. It's hard being patient. So what's going to happen when you're on your road to meet your highest self, but it don't come as quick as you think, and you start to become tired and you start to become weary and weak from the journey. All right. Michael Jordan even had this problem. When Michael Jordan retired in 1993, he was very, very, beat up physically and mentally from that whole process of the 82 games of the NBA season and then going into the playoffs, the first round, the second round, the conference finals, and then the NBA championship. He had already done that, up until that point. I think he came in 84 up until 1993. So he had been doing that for a while and his body was very, very tired, aka his Odyssean journey. He was very, very tired from it. So when he retired, in order to try to avoid the long, arduous journey, he tried to take a shortcut. So instead of Jordan coming back during the full season, what he did was he came back in the middle of the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken, he came back actually when they played against the Orlando Magic. And that was in either the second or the third round of the 94-95 season. And, Jordan thinking that he could skip certain steps, what he found and realized is that his legs weren't in shape. His body was not in shape because he had been playing baseball. He had baseball legs. He did his shins, his legs, his knees. They weren't in basketball shape. He didn't have the stamina and the endurance of the basketball player. He had been coming from playing baseball. And in baseball, it's a lot of standing around. It's not a quick, fast-paced movement game like basketball is. So after being out of the NBA for about a year and a half, his body was not prepared and ready to come back and take on that type of pressure that's going to be required in the NBA playoffs. And as we all know, the Orlando Magic ended up beating the Chicago Bulls, and Michael Jordan actually lost. Okay, so that's when he found out that there actually are no shortcuts. You have to go through the full Odyssean journey, aka the full 82 games, aka you got to go through the full process of life to becoming a man. There are no shortcuts. There is no quick, easy route to hurry up and get where you want to go. So I'm saying all that to say this. When you're on that long journey and it is arduous and your endurance starts to be attacked, you become vulnerable and open to distractions. And in this, journey of Odysseus, he became distracted. And what distracted Odysseus? The sirens. The sirens are just symbology of the woman or women. Okay, so what I'm here to tell you is that while you're on your Odyssean journey to becoming the highest version of yourself as a man, The woman will serve as a distraction to you. I'm not saying that you can't interact with women while you're along the path. Of course you can. But it won't be in the way that which you think. And it won't be in the way that your emotions want to lead you to. Your emotions are going to want to make you commit. Your emotions are going to want to make you get in this relationship. So you have constant affection from the woman. So you have constant emotional connection to the woman. So you have constant and consistent sexual gratification from the woman. But all those things, believe it or not, will slow you down from actually reaching Ithaca. So in other words, remember, when Odysseus left, he was the king of Ithaca, and he has to return to his kingdom to become the king of Ithaca. So he couldn't afford to be distracted. But that journey was so long that he ended up becoming distracted. And he ended up staying on the island with the sirens for a couple of years. So he was distracted and thrown off course for quite some time. And if you've seen the movie, when Odysseus, before he went to the island, he was very manly. He had the power of the lion and the cunningness of the fox. But once he got to the island and those women started to basically create the environment around him that his emotions wanted to feel. Because every man that's on this long journey to become your higher self, you want to feel the gratification of the success and the comfort that the woman can provide. And once the woman starts providing that, if you're not careful, it'll serve as a distraction. And you'll see time going on and you won't be getting any closer to your journey. And you also will start to become effeminized as well. In the movie with the Odyssey, when Odysseus actually reached the island of the sirens, and if I'm not mistaken, Vanessa Williams, she played one of the sirens. After years of being there, Odysseus became effeminized. He started dancing and prancing around and, playing the harp. He had dandelions and flowers in his head, and he had completely lost track of time. So much time had went past that he was distracted for so long that he didn't even realize that he was on that island for years, and he was getting no closer to his kingdom. And back at his kingdom at home, his wife and his son were being made mockeries. And actually his kingdom was starting to disintegrate a little bit because he was gone as the leader. And even though his son was going to be the next in line, you had other men who were basically trying to fight for power and trying to force themselves into a marriage with his wife and basically banish his son. So now they will be the king. So also understand this too. The more you bullshit around and the more you allow these women to distract you, your kingdom is starting to slowly dissolve and disintegrate. The people in the future that require you, that are depending on you, are slowly suffering. It also reminds me of Back to the Future, when Marty McFly went to the past and he had to basically clean up his father's history because he wanted his future to turn out a certain way. And when he was in the past and his father was bullshitting and he was being distracted and he was effeminized and he was being weak, what Marty McFly was noticing is that it's his picture that of himself and his siblings in the future. The more his father was being distracted in the past and becoming effeminized, they were disappearing on the picture that they were supposed to be on in the future, meaning that they weren't going to exist. So when you become distracted or you become effeminized in one way or another, when you become neutered one way or another, your destiny and your objective slowly will start to dissipate. And time will go on and you won't reach your purpose. So understand that the woman is a distraction on the journey. Some of them intentionally try to be distractions. Some of them do not. So this is not something where where we're saying that the woman is an enemy or something is wrong with the woman, etc. This is just the natural state of the woman. Yeah, but the woman, she serves as a distraction. I'll give you another example of this. I was just at the barbershop the other day. And my barber, who is 52 years old, he's much older than me. He's an older grown man who's an entrepreneur that has already been through certain phases of the Odyssean journey that I haven't. So when he tells me things, I listen to him. You should always listen to an older brother that has wisdom. But he was telling me that during the COVID-19 shutdown, they shut down all the barbershops, right? And his barbershop business is his livelihood. This is where he makes his money. This is how he takes care of his business and his household and his family. He told me he has 3 or 4 daughters. So during the COVID-19 shutdown, while he was at home, he told me that he kind of was worrying a little bit about, the security of his business, because he didn't want, his clientele to get lost, and he didn't want to get behind on his bills. So while he was at home, still concerned with this, he told me that his wife was telling him, "Oh, baby, just relax. Oh, baby, let's just enjoy this extra family time. Oh, baby, don't worry about that. Let's just be at home and let's just be in this moment right now." So in other words, she tried to almost set up like a form of for lack of a better word, a distraction. And he said that they kind of got into a rift and an argument because he was trying to let her know, like, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm the man of the family. I'm the one that's responsible for the family. I'm the one that's bringing in the economic and the financial livelihood of the family. So I can't afford to just sit back and get distracted and do nothing. I got to keep this thing going forward, because if too much time goes by, we're going to get behind on bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the woman would have left him anyway. So that's another thing that you got to understand. Even when you choose to get distracted by the woman, when things fail because you got distracted, she's going to leave you anyway. That's the irony and the paradox to it. When you follow the woman's distractions, when she tells you, "Oh, baby, let's just go do this," but it's something else important you're supposed to be doing. When you leave your destiny and you go just to hang out with the woman, not only are you going to end up fucking everything up, but once everything goes to shit, the woman going to leave you anyway. So it's a lose-lose regardless. If you sit there and bullshit and waste time, you're not going to meet your destiny, and the woman's going to leave you anyway. So it's a double whammy. So part of the hero's journey is that you have to learn to ignore and disdain, and, the woman has to be put to the side in certain times. And also you have to learn to be emotionless. You have to learn to be cold. And this is why, and I'm gonna get ready to wrap it up, but this is why a lot of brothers today are not gonna be able to do this, because you all grew up in these highly feminine these highly feminine charged environments, because a lot of us don't have our father figure around to give us these tools and these principles, so we'll know what to expect in life and we'll know how to move forward. A lot of you all didn't grow up with that. A lot of you grew up seeing how women respond to certain situations. And even though you may be in a male body, you have the psychology and the emotional pattern of a female, which is something that's very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous to have a male with a female mind and emotions, because that's what you see actually in the prison system a lot. A lot of males who responded to things in a female manner, and they ended up killing somebody or murdering someone or doing something that they more than likely that they regret. Okay. So this is not something that is for the weak. Becoming an entrepreneur, becoming the God man, whatever you want to call it, this is not something that I would recommend for everybody. Some of you all don't have the strength for this. Some of you all don't have the patience for this. Some of you all don't have the courage for this. Some of you all don't have the endurance for this. Some of you all don't have the strength for this. Some of you all still feel like you're going to be missing out on something. Some of you all don't have the sexual discipline for this. Okay. So once again, I'm not saying that while you're on your Odyssean journey, you can't deal with the woman. Of course you can. You're supposed to deal with women because that's healthy. But dealing with them so much so that they take you off the path, dealing with them so much so to where they require you to commit to them and leave your journey and your destiny behind. No. You're not supposed to do that. Okay. So these are very, very important things that a young man must know and must accept if he plans to become anything of power in this lifetime. Okay. So you all stay tuned for the next one. I'm out.